The most valuable life lessons from struggle and failure. I trusted my son with everything, my savings, my home, my future, and in return, he planned to throw me away like yesterday's newspaper. What I discovered about the people I loved most would shatter my heart, but it would also teach me the most valuable lesson of my 72 years. Sometimes the family that betrays you isn't your real family at all. Before I begin my story, let me know in the comments where you are listening from and what time it is. I just want to know I'm not alone in this. And if you feel moved by what you hear, consider subscribing. It helps more people become aware of the reality of elder abuse. Now let me tell you what really happened. My name is Mabel Richardson, and for 72 years, I believed that family was everything. I raised 3 children in the same house where I'm sitting right now, the house my late husband Jerome and I bought when Marcus was just 2 years old. We scraped together every penny for that down payment, dreaming of the life we'd build within these walls. Jerome passed when the children were still young. Marcus was 15, little Sarah was 12, and my baby Thomas was only 8. People said I'd never manage on my own, a black woman with 3 kids and a teacher's salary in 1983. But I proved them wrong. I worked double shifts tutoring after school, took in sewing on weekends, and somehow kept food on the table and clothes on their backs. Marcus was my rock during those hard years. While other teenage boys were getting into trouble, he was helping with his younger siblings, walking them to school, making sure they did their homework. "Don't worry, Mama," he'd say, patting my shoulder when I'd collapse into my chair after another 16-hour day. "I'm gonna take care of you when I grow up. You'll never have to worry about money again." And he kept that promise. Or so I thought. Marcus became everything I'd hoped for and more. He got a full scholarship to business school, graduated with honors, and built a successful consulting company. He married Sandra, a polished woman with perfect hair and designer handbags who called me Mother Richardson, in that sweet voice of hers. They lived in a beautiful house across town with their 2 children, and every Sunday, they'd come for dinner. Sarah became a nurse and moved to Atlanta with her husband. Thomas joined the military and was stationed overseas. But Marcus stayed close, always checking on me, always making sure I was okay. When I turned 70 and mentioned that the stairs were getting harder to climb, he immediately started talking about making the house safer for me. "Mama, you're not getting any younger," he'd say, looking around the living room with those calculating eyes I didn't recognize then. "This house is too big for you now. All these stairs, this old wiring. The neighborhood's changing too. You need to start thinking about your future." But this house was my future. Every corner held a memory. The kitchen where I taught all 3 children to cook. The living room where we'd gather for Christmas morning. The back porch where Jerome and I used to sit and plan our dreams. This wasn't just a house, it was the museum of my life. "I'm managing just fine," I'd tell Marcus, but he'd shake his head with that concerned expression. "Mama, you had that fall last month. What if something serious happened and nobody was here? What if you couldn't get to the phone?" The fall. It was barely a stumble really, just caught my foot on the edge of the rug and went down on one knee. Nothing broken. Just a bruised ego and a sore knee for a few days. But somehow, in Marcus's telling, it became this dramatic emergency that proved I was no longer capable of living independently. "We're just worried about you, Mother Richardson," Sandra would add, her voice dripping with fake concern. "Marcus barely sleeps at night thinking about you here all alone." That's when they started suggesting I get help. Just a little assistance, they said. Someone to clean, maybe cook a meal or 2. Help with errands. It seemed reasonable, even thoughtful. My successful son caring for his aging mother. What could be wrong with that? "I've already found someone perfect," Marcus announced one Sunday after dinner. "Her name is Rosa Martinez, and she comes highly recommended. She can start tomorrow." I hadn't even agreed to having help. But suddenly it was decided. When I started to protest, Marcus held up his hand with that patient smile he used when he thought I was being difficult. Mama, let me handle this. You've taken care of everyone else your whole life. Now it's time to let someone take care of you. Those words should have been comforting. Instead, they made something twist uncomfortably in my stomach. But I pushed the feeling away. This was Marcus, my good son, my success story. He loved me. He was just looking out for me. Rosa arrived the next morning, a middle-aged Latina woman with kind eyes and gentle hands. She was quiet at first, almost nervous, which I found strange. She moved around the house carefully, as if she was afraid to disturb anything. Has my son given you specific instructions? I asked her as she folded laundry in the living room. Rosa paused, her hand stilling on one of my blouses. He has a very detailed list of things I should monitor. Not help with, not assist, monitor. What kind of things? She looked uncomfortable. Your eating habits, your sleeping patterns. When you leave the house, who visits you? He wants daily reports about me. In my own home. That night I called Marcus. Son, I appreciate you getting me help, but I don't need someone watching my every move like I'm a child. Mama, he said, and I could hear the edge of impatience in his voice. Rosa is there for your safety. We need to know you're okay. What if you fell again and didn't tell anyone? What if you forgot to eat or take your medicine? I don't take any medicine, Marcus, and I've never forgotten to eat a meal in my life. You're 72. Mama. Things change. We're just being cautious. But something in his tone made me think this wasn't about caution at all. This was about control. Over the next few weeks, Rosa and I developed a friendship despite the awkward circumstances. She was a good woman, working hard to support her own family, and I could see she was uncomfortable with some of the things Marcus expected her to report. Mrs. Richardson, she said one afternoon as we sat on the back porch, can I ask you something? Of course. Dear, why does your son want to know so much about your finances? He asked me to look through your mail, your bank statements. That doesn't seem normal. My blood went cold. He asked you to go through my personal papers. Rosa nodded reluctantly. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that. But he said it was necessary to make sure you weren't being taken advantage of by scammers or making poor decisions with your money. Poor decisions with my money. I'd managed my finances just fine for 30 years as a widow, thank you very much. I'd paid off this house, put 3 children through school, and still had a decent nest egg in the bank. What poor decisions was I supposedly making? That evening, I went to my bedroom and opened the small filing cabinet where I kept my important papers. Everything looked normal at first glance. But then I noticed something. The folders weren't in the same order I always kept them. Someone had been through my files. Someone who had a key to my house. I sat on the edge of my bed, my hands shaking slightly as the pieces began to fall into place. The sudden concern about my safety. The insistence on getting help I didn't need. The daily monitoring. The interest in my finances. This wasn't about taking care of me. This was about taking care of something else entirely. The next morning, I woke up with a heaviness in my chest that had nothing to do with my age. I'd barely slept, turning over and over in my mind the conversation with Rosa about my files being searched. By the time the sun came up, I'd made a decision. I was going to pay more attention to what was really happening in my own home. Rosa arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, as she had every morning for the past month. But today, I watched her differently. I noticed how she avoided eye contact when she asked about my plans for the day. I saw how her hands trembled slightly when she picked up the mail from the front table. Rosa, I said gently, why need to talk? She froze, a stack of envelopes clutched in her hands. Is something wrong, Mrs. Richardson? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Please sit down. We settled at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd helped my children with homework decades ago. Rosa kept her eyes fixed on her folded hands. I want you to know that I don't blame you for anything, I began. You're trying to do your job, and I understand that, but I need to know exactly what my son has asked you to do." The silence stretched between us like a taut wire. Finally, Rosa looked up, and I saw tears forming in her eyes. "Mrs. Richardson, I don't want to cause trouble. I need this job. My daughter is starting college next year. And Rosa," I reached across and covered her hands with mine, "I'm not going to fire you, but I need the truth. All of it." Oh, she took a shaky breath. "Mr. Marcus, he doesn't just want daily reports about your health and activities. He wants copies of everything. Your mail, your bank statements, any phone calls you make." He gave me a small camera to put in the living room, but I couldn't do that. That felt too wrong. A camera. My own son wanted to put a camera in my living room to spy on me. "What else?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. "He's been asking me to encourage you to think about selling the house. He wants me to mention how hard it must be to maintain, how dangerous the stairs are, how much money you could save by moving somewhere smaller." Rosa's voice was barely above a whisper. "And he's asked me to document any time you seem confused or forgetful, even if it's just normal things like misplacing your reading glasses." My stomach dropped. "He wants you to make me seem incompetent." Rosa nodded miserably. "I told him you're one of the sharpest people I've ever met, but he said that older people can hide their decline very well. He said he was worried about your judgment." "Oh, my judgment." The same judgment that had successfully raised 3 children, managed a classroom of students for 30 years, and handled all my own affairs since Jerome died. Suddenly, at 72, my judgment was supposedly failing. "Rosa, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. In the month you've been here, have you seen any signs that I'm losing my mental abilities? Any real signs, not just normal human forgetfulness?" She met my eyes directly for the first time that morning. "Mrs. Richardson, you're more organized than I am. You remember everything, what day the trash goes out, when your doctor appointments are, your grandchildren's birthdays, which neighbor prefers which type of cookies when you bake for them. You balance your checkbook to the penny and read 3 books a week. If you're losing your mind, then I lost mine 20 years ago. Relief and anger washed over me in equal measures. Relief that I wasn't going crazy, anger that my own son was trying to make it seem like I was." "There's something else," Rosa continued reluctantly. "Yesterday, when you were at your hair appointment, Mr. Marcus came by. He brought some papers for you to sign. He left them on your kitchen counter and told me to make sure you signed them when you got back. He said they were just updates to your insurance policies." I looked at the kitchen counter. There were indeed some official-looking documents there, papers I'd glanced at but hadn't had a chance to read carefully. My son had been in my house, leaving papers for me to sign, while I wasn't even home. I walked over and picked up the documents. The letterhead looked legitimate, some legal firm downtown. But as I read through the dense legal language, certain phrases jumped out at me: power of attorney, financial guardianship, transfer of assets for protection purposes. These weren't insurance updates. These were papers that would give Marcus complete control over my finances and my property. "Rosa," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "I need you to do something for me. Can you make copies of these papers before I sign them? I want to have my own lawyer look at them first." She nodded quickly. "Of course, Mrs. Richardson. And there's something else you should know. Marcus called this morning before I came over. He's planning to visit this afternoon with Mrs. Sandra. He sounded urgent, because he expected me to have signed those papers by now." Trusting him completely, the way I always had. The rest of the morning passed in a strange fog. I tried to go about my normal routine, watering my plants, reading the newspaper, starting a load of laundry, but my mind kept circling back to those papers and what they meant. My son, the child I'd sacrificed everything for, was trying to trick me into signing away my independence. At 2 o'clock, Marcus's silver BMW pulled into my driveway. Through the front window I watched him and Sandra walk up the path, both of them wearing expressions of concern that now looked completely fake to my eyes. "Mama," Marcus called out as he came through the front door with his own key. "How are you feeling today?" "I'm fine, Marcus. The same as I was yesterday and the day before that." Sandra glided over and kissed my cheek, her perfume overwhelming in the small space. "Mother Richardson, you look tired. Are you sleeping well? Rosa mentioned you've seemed a bit scattered lately." Scattered. Rosa had mentioned no such thing, but Sandra delivered the lie with such smooth confidence that I almost doubted my own memory. "I sleep just fine, Sandra, though I might sleep better if I didn't have people going through my personal papers while I'm out." Marcus had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Mama, I was just trying to help you get your affairs in order. At your age, it's important to have proper protections in place." "Protections from what?" "From people who might take advantage of you, from making mistakes with your finances, from," he gestured around the living room, "from living in a situation that's no longer safe for someone your age. This house has been perfectly safe for me for 40 years, Marcus." "But you're not the same person you were 40 years ago, Mama. Or even 5 years ago. People change. Their capabilities change. There's no shame in admitting that you need help." I looked at my son, really looked at him. When had his eyes become so calculating? When had his voice taken on that patronizing tone, like he was speaking to a confused child? Or had he always been this way, and I'd just been too blinded by love and pride to see it? "I've been reading over those papers you left for me," I said calmly. Marcus straightened up, suddenly alert. "Good. I know all that legal language can be confusing, but it's really very straightforward. Just some basic protections to make sure your finances are handled properly if anything happens to you. And you would be the one handling them?" "Well, yes. As your eldest son. It makes sense for me too." "Marcus." I held up my hand to stop him. "I'm not signing these papers." The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus and Sandra exchanged a look that was full of meaning. A silent conversation I wasn't privy to. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had lost all warmth. "Mama, I think you're not understanding the situation clearly. These protections are necessary. The world is dangerous for elderly people living alone. You could be scammed, taken advantage of, hurt. We're trying to help you, but taking away my right to make my own decisions. By making sure the right decisions get made." Sandra's voice was no longer sweet. There was a sharp edge to it now, like a knife hidden in silk. "Mother Richardson, with all due respect, you're not equipped to handle complex financial and legal matters at this stage of your life." This stage of my life. As if being 72 automatically made me incompetent. "I've been handling my own financial and legal matters since before you were born, Sandra." "Times have changed," Marcus said firmly. "Things are more complicated now. You need professional guidance, and you need someone you can trust to look out for your best interests. And you think you're that person. I know I am. Mama, I'm your son. I love you. Everything I'm doing is for your own good." Those words, "for your own good," hit me like a slap. How many times had I heard them over the past few months? Every suggestion about the house being too big, every comment about my capabilities declining, every new restriction presented as concern for my welfare. It had all been for my own good, but whose good was it really for? "I need time to think about this," I said finally. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Mama, these papers need to be filed soon. The lawyers are waiting, and there are deadlines." "Then they'll have to wait a little longer." "You're being stubborn and unreasonable," Sandra snapped, her mask finally slipping completely. "We're trying to help you, and you're acting like we're the enemy. Aren't you?" I thought, but I didn't say it out loud. "Not yet." Marcus stood up abruptly. "Fine. We'll give you a few days to think it over. But Mama, these protections are going to happen one way or another. It would be easier for everyone if you cooperated. The threat was subtle but unmistakable. These protections were going to happen whether I agreed or not. After they left, I sat in my living room staring at those papers until the words blurred together. Rosa found me there an hour later, still holding the documents in my shaking hands. "Mrs. Richardson, are you all right?" I looked up at her kind face. This woman who was essentially a stranger but who had shown me more honesty in the past month than my own son had. "Rosa," I said quietly, "I think I'm in trouble." She sat down beside me on the couch. "What can I do to help?" For the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe I wasn't as alone as I'd thought. "Help me understand what's really happening here," I said. "And help me figure out how to fight back." The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. For too long, I'd been letting other people tell me what I needed, what I should do, how I should live. But lying in bed at sunrise, listening to the familiar sounds of my neighborhood waking up, I remembered who I was before I became the elderly mother who needed taking care of. I was Mabel Richardson. I'd raised 3 children on my own. I'd taught hundreds of students to read and think and dream. I'd managed a household, finances, and a full-time career for decades without anyone's help. Just because I was 72 didn't mean I'd suddenly become helpless. When Rosa arrived, I was already dressed and sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee and a legal pad covered in notes. "Mrs. Richardson, you look different this morning," she said carefully. "I feel different. Rosa, I want to ask you a favor, and I need you to know that I'll understand completely if you say no." She poured herself a cup of coffee and sat across from me. "What do you need?" "I need to know everything Marcus has asked you to do and report. Every conversation, every instruction, every request. And I need to know if he's said anything about his plans for me or this house when he thought I couldn't hear." Rosa was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee thoughtfully. "Mrs. Richardson, if I tell you everything, I could lose this job, and I need to be honest with you. I've been recording some of our conversations." My blood went cold. "Recording them? For Marcus?" "No," she said quickly. "For me, for protection. Some of the things he was asking me to do felt wrong, and I wanted to have proof of what he actually said in case there were ever questions about it later." She reached into her purse and pulled out a small digital recorder. "Mrs. Richardson, your son has been asking me to do things that aren't about your health or safety. They're about building a case." "A case for what?" "A case that you're no longer competent to live independently or manage your own affairs." The words hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd already suspected as much. Hearing it confirmed made it real in a way that twisted my stomach into knots. "Play me the recordings," I said quietly. For the next hour, I listened to my son's voice laying out his plan with clinical precision. The first recording was from Rosa's second week on the job. "Marcus, I need you to document every instance where she seems confused, forgetful, or makes poor decisions. Even small things, if she can't find her keys, if she forgets a neighbor's name, if she leaves a pot on the stove too long. Keep detailed notes with dates and times." Rosa, "Mr. Richardson, your mother seems very sharp to me. She remembers everything and—" "Yes, Marcus." "Rosa, I appreciate your loyalty to her, but you're not a medical professional. Elderly people can be very good at hiding cognitive decline. That's why I need objective documentation." The second recording was more recent. "Marcus, as she signed those papers yet?" "Rosa, she said she wants her own lawyer to look at them first." Marcus, that's exactly the kind of paranoid thinking that proves she's not thinking clearly. Normal people trust their family. This suspicious behavior needs to go in your report." "Rosa, sir, wanting to understand legal documents before signing them seems reasonable to me." "Marcus, Rosa, I'm paying you to observe and report, not to make judgments about what's reasonable. Document her refusal to cooperate with family assistance. That's important for the case." The case. There it was, spoken plainly. This wasn't about caring for me. This was about building a legal case to have me declared incompetent. The third recording made my hands shake. Sandra's voice. How much longer is this going to take? The real estate market is hot right now. If we wait much longer, we'll miss the opportunity. Asked Marcus. It takes as long as it takes. But once we have guardianship, we can move fast. The house should sell for at least $400,000 in this market, maybe more. After we pay for her care at Sunset Manor, there should be plenty left. Sandra, Sunset Manor. Marcus, that place is barely a step above a warehouse. Surely we can afford something better. See, Marcus. It's clean and safe, and it's cheap. She won't know the difference once her mind really starts to go. The important thing is preserving the assets. I had to stop the recording. My own son was planning to warehouse me in the cheapest nursing home he could find, so he could pocket the difference from selling my house. The house where I'd raised him, where I'd sacrificed everything to give him opportunities, where every room held memories of our family. There's more, Rosa said softly. I nodded, though I wasn't sure I could handle more. The fourth recording was the worst, Marcus. The key is moving quickly once we get the guardianship approved. Transfer the house title, liquidate the savings accounts, get her moved into care. If we do it fast enough, she won't have time to fight it legally. Sandra, what about her other children? Won't they object? Marcus, Sarah lives in Atlanta and barely calls. Thomas is deployed overseas. By the time they know what's happening, it'll be done. And honestly, they'll probably thank me for handling everything. Rosa, Mr. Richardson. What if she finds out what you're planning? Marcus? She's an old woman, Rosa. Even if she suspects something, who's going to believe her over me? I'm a successful businessman with an impeccable reputation. She's elderly and clearly declining. The courts will see what needs to be seen. I turned off the recorder and sat in silence for several minutes. My son, the child I'd held when he was sick, taught to ride a bike, cheered for at every school play and graduation, saw me as nothing more than an obstacle to his inheritance. Worse, he was counting on people dismissing me simply because of my age. Mrs. Richardson, Rosa said gently, there's something else you need to know. Yesterday, after you refused to sign the papers, Mr. Marcus called me. He wants me to start giving you medication. What kind of medication? He says it's for anxiety and depression. He claims you've been more agitated lately and that it might help you think more clearly. But Mrs. Richardson, she hesitated. The medication he wants me to give you, I looked it up. In elderly people, it can cause confusion, memory problems, and disorientation. My blood turned to ice. He wants to drug me into the very condition he's claiming I already have. I think so. And he wants me to document how much better you seem after you start taking it, how much calmer and more agreeable you become. I stood up abruptly and began pacing around the kitchen. The scope of Marcus's betrayal was breathtaking. It wasn't just theft. It was a complete destruction of everything I was and everything I'd built. He was planning to erase me as a person and reduce me to a problem to be managed. Rosa, I need to ask you something, and I need a completely honest answer. Why are you helping me? You could lose your job, and you've said you need the money. And she was quiet for a moment, then looked directly at me. Mrs. Richardson, I have a mother too. She's 78 and lives with me and my family. If anyone ever tried to do to her what your son is planning to do to you, I would want someone to help her fight back. Some things are more important than money. I felt tears stinging my eyes for the first time since this whole nightmare had started. What do you think I should do? I think you should call a lawyer today, and I think you should warn your other children about what's happening. But most importantly, I think you should not sign anything else, not take any medication, and not let Marcus have any more access to your personal papers or finances. She was right, of course, but the thought of going to war with my own son felt like stepping off a cliff. Could I really do this? Could I really fight the child I'd loved and sacrificed for? Then I thought about that recording of him planning to warehouse me at Sunset Manor while he pocketed my life savings. I thought about him wanting to drug me into confusion. I thought about him dismissing my intelligence and independence as the ramblings of a declining old woman. Yes, I could fight him. I had to. Rosa, will you help me make some phone calls? She nodded firmly. Where do we start? First, I'm calling my lawyer. Then I'm calling Sarah and Thomas. It's time they knew what their brother is really planning. I paused, looking around my kitchen, in my house, filled with my memories. And then we're going to figure out how to make sure Marcus never gets control of my life. For the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Not a helpless elderly woman who needed managing, but Mabel Richardson, a woman who'd overcome challenges before and was about to do it again. The war for my independence was about to begin, and I wasn't going to lose without a fight. The law office of Patricia Williams was nothing like the imposing downtown firm where Marcus wanted me to sign those papers. It was in a converted house near the university, with comfortable chairs and family photos on the desk. Patricia herself was a woman about Sarah's age, with silver, streaked hair and kind eyes that reminded me of Rosa's. Mrs. Richardson, she said after I'd finished explaining my situation, I have to tell you, elder abuse cases involving family members are some of the most difficult to handle. The emotional toll alone can be devastating. More devastating than losing everything I've worked for and being drugged into submission, I asked. She smiled grimly. Point taken. Let me be clear about what we're dealing with here. Your son is attempting what's called guardianship abuse. If he succeeds in having you declared incompetent, he would have complete control over your finances, your living situation, and even your medical care. You would essentially become a legal child again. The words sent a chill through me. Can he actually do that? Unfortunately, yes, if he can convince a judge that you're no longer capable of caring for yourself. The standard is fairly low. He doesn't need to prove you have dementia, just that you lack the capacity to make sound decisions about your welfare. Rosa, who had come with me for moral support, leaned forward. But she's perfectly capable. Anyone who spends 5 minutes with her can see that. You're right, Patricia agreed. But the system is designed to err on the side of protection, especially when it's a family member making the petition. Judges see adult children concerned about elderly parents every day, and they're inclined to trust that the family has the elder's best interests at heart, even when they clearly don't. Even then. Which is why we need to be proactive. Patricia opened a yellow legal pad and began taking notes. First, I want you to have a complete cognitive evaluation done by a geriatric psychiatrist. We need professional documentation that you're mentally competent. That makes sense. Second, we're going to revoke any existing power of attorney documents you may have signed and create new ones that specifically exclude Marcus from any role in your financial or medical decisions. I never signed a power of attorney, I said. Patricia looked up sharply. Are you sure? Sometimes people sign them as part of estate planning without realizing what they are. I thought carefully about all the papers I'd signed over the years. I'm certain. Jerome and I always handled our own affairs, and I've continued to do so. Good. That means Marcus would have to go through the courts to get guardianship, which gives us time to prepare a defense. She made more notes. Third, I want you to gather all your financial records, bank statements, investment accounts, insurance policies, the deed to your house. We need to show that you've been managing your affairs competently. I can do that. Finally, and this might be the most important part, you need to tell your other children what's happening. If Marcus files for guardianship, they have the right to contest it. Their testimony about your mental state will carry a lot of weight. My stomach knotted at the thought of calling Sarah and Thomas. How do you tell your children that their brother is trying to steal their mother's life? But Patricia was right. They needed to know. Mrs. Richardson, Patricia continued, I need to warn you about something. Once Marcus realizes you're fighting back, things are likely to escalate. He may try to have you committed for a psychiatric evaluation, or he might claim you're being manipulated by others. She glanced at Rosa. He might even try to get Rosa fired or claim she's taking advantage of you financially. Can he do that? He can try. That's why I want you to be very careful about who you trust and what you sign. Don't take any medication that Marcus provides. Don't let him into your house without Rosa present, and document everything. Every conversation, every visit, every attempt to pressure you. We left Patricia's office with a plan and a small measure of hope. But as Rosa drove me home, I felt the weight of what lay ahead. I was about to go to war with my own son, and there was no guarantee I would win. That afternoon, I made the hardest phone call of my life. Mama! Sarah's voice was bright and cheerful when she answered. This is a nice surprise. How are you doing? Sarah, honey, I need to tell you something important, and I need you to listen carefully. The tone of my voice must have alarmed her because her cheerfulness immediately shifted to concern. What's wrong? Are you sick? No, baby, I'm fine. But Marcus is trying to have me declared incompetent so he can take control of my finances and sell the house. Silence. Then, Mama, what are you talking about? Marcus has been worried sick about you. He says you've been confused and paranoid lately. My heart sank. Marcus had already been working on Sarah, preparing her for this moment. Sarah, I need you to listen to me carefully. I am not confused, and I am not paranoid. Marcus has been planning this for months. He's had Rosa documenting everything I do, looking for signs of incompetence that don't exist. Mama, that doesn't sound like Marcus. He's always taken such good care of you. Has he? Sarah, when was the last time you talked to me directly about my health or my living situation? When was the last time you asked me what I wanted instead of what Marcus told you I needed? Another long silence. I could almost hear Sarah thinking, remembering. Marcus said you didn't like to worry us with your problems. He said he was handling everything so we didn't have to. He was handling everything. All right. But not for my benefit. I took a deep breath and told her about the recordings, about Marcus's plan to sell the house and put me in Sunset Manor, about the medication he wanted Rosa to give me. By the time I finished, Sarah was crying. Mama, I'm so sorry. I should have been paying more attention. I should have been talking to you directly instead of just getting updates from Marcus. It's not your fault, honey. Marcus is very good at making himself seem like the responsible one. But I need your help now. I need you to be prepared to testify that I'm mentally competent if this goes to court. Of course, Mama. Whatever you need. Should I come home? Not yet. But be ready. And Sarah, don't tell Marcus about this conversation. He can't know that I've figured out his plan. My call to Thomas was even more difficult. He was stationed in Germany 7 hours ahead, and I caught him just as he was getting ready for bed. Mom, is everything okay? It's pretty late there. I explained the situation as quickly as I could, knowing his phone time was limited. Thomas's reaction was immediate and explosive. That son of a bitch, he said, his military training evident in his language. Sorry, Mom, but Marcus always was a greedy bastard, even as a kid. He couldn't stand anyone else having something he wanted. Thomas. No, Mom, this makes sense. He's been asking me weird questions in his emails. Stuff about whether I thought you were handling your finances okay, whether I was worried about you living alone. I thought he was just being a concerned brother, but he was fishing for ammunition. Can you help if this goes to court? I'll request emergency leave if I have to. Mom, you raised us better than this. Marcus knows exactly what he's doing, and it's disgusting. After I hung up, I sat in my living room feeling emotionally drained but also oddly relieved. At least now I wasn't fighting this battle alone. Sarah and Thomas knew the truth, and they were on my side. Rosa found me there an hour later, staring out the window at the garden Jerome and I had planted 30 years ago. How did the calls go? She asked gently. Hard but good. They believe me. They're going to help. I turned to look at her. Rosa, I need to ask you something else. Patricia warned me that Marcus might try to get you fired or claim you're taking advantage of me somehow. Are you prepared for that? Rosa straightened her shoulders in a way that reminded me of my students when they were determined to prove a point. Mrs. Richardson, let him try. I have those recordings. Remember, if he wants to accuse me of anything, he'll have to explain why he was asking me to document fake symptoms and give you unnecessary medication. This could get ugly. It's already ugly. The question is whether we're going to let him win. That evening, as I sat at my kitchen table reviewing my financial records for Patricia, I felt something I hadn't felt in months, like myself again. Not a helpless old woman who needed managing, but Mabel Richardson, a fighter who had overcome obstacles before, and was going to overcome this one too. I thought about all the students I'd taught over the years, especially the ones who came from difficult situations. I'd always told them the same thing. You are stronger than whatever is trying to break you, but you have to be willing to fight back. It was time to take my own advice. The next morning, Marcus called just as Rosa and I were finishing breakfast. Mama, how are you feeling today? Rosa mentioned you seemed a little agitated yesterday. I looked at Rosa, who shook her head firmly. She hadn't told him anything of the sort. I feel fine, Marcus. Never better? Actually, that's good to hear. Listen, I've been thinking about those papers we discussed. I really think we should get them filed soon. The lawyers are pressing me about the deadlines. Marcus, I told you I'm not signing those papers. A pause. Mama, I'm concerned about this resistance you're showing to getting help. It's not like you to be so stubborn about family assistance. Family assistance. Even his language was calculated to make me sound unreasonable. I'm not being stubborn, Marcus. I'm being careful. Those papers would give you complete control over my finances and my living situation. Why would I sign something like that? Because you trust me. Because I'm your son and I love you. Because I'm trying to protect you. His voice was taking on that patient, patronizing tone I'd come to recognize. Mama, this paranoid thinking is exactly what I've been worried about. Paranoid thinking. There it was, the first step in his campaign to paint me as mentally unstable. Marcus, I said calmly, I've made my decision. I'm not signing those papers. I'm not taking any medication you want to give me, and I'm perfectly capable of managing my own affairs. Is there anything else you need to discuss? The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if he'd hung up. When he spoke again, his voice was different, colder, more calculating. Mama, I hope you understand that I can't let you continue down this path of self-destructive decision-making. As your son, I have a responsibility to make sure you're safe, even if you don't want the help. The threat was clear, even wrapped in loving language. Marcus was done asking for my cooperation. Now he was going to take what he wanted, whether I agreed or not. Is that a threat, Marcus? It's a promise, Mama. I'm going to take care of you, one way or another. After he hung up, I looked at Rosa, who had heard the entire conversation. He's going to escalate now, she said quietly. Yes, he is. I stood up and straightened my shoulders. Then we'd better be ready for him. The real battle was about to begin. 3 days after my conversation with Marcus, I was in my garden deadheading the roses when 2 police officers appeared at my gate. My blood went cold, but I forced myself to stay calm as they approached. Mom, are you Mabel Richardson? The younger officer asked. I am. We've received a call from your son expressing concern for your welfare. He says you've been acting erratically and may be a danger to yourself. I set down my gardening shears carefully, my hands surprisingly steady. Officers, I can assure you that I am perfectly fine. I'm tending my garden, which I've done every day for 30 years. There's nothing erratic or dangerous about that. The older officer looked around at my well-maintained yard, clearly noting that everything was neat and organized. Ma'am, your son says you've been refusing medical care and making threats against family members. That's not true. I haven't threatened anyone, and I don't need medical care. I saw my doctor for my regular checkup just 2 weeks ago. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the business card Patricia had given me. Officers, I believe this is harassment related to a family financial dispute. Here's my attorney's information if you need to verify my mental competency. The younger officer looked uncertain, but the older one studied me more carefully. Ma'am, you seem perfectly lucid to me, but we do need to file a report since a complaint was made. I understand. Would you like to see my medical records? Speak to my doctor. I have nothing to hide. Just then, Rosa appeared from the house carrying a tray with glasses of iced tea. Officers, good afternoon. Is everything all right? And you are? The older officer asked. Rosa Martinez. I'm Mrs. Richardson's home health aide. She set down the tray and looked directly at the officers. Is there some kind of problem? We received a complaint about Mrs. Richardson's mental state. Rosa's expression hardened. From whom? Her son, Marcus Richardson. Officers, I've been working with Mrs. Richardson for 2 months. She's one of the sharpest, most organized people I know. She manages her own finances, maintains this house and garden, reads voraciously, and has an excellent memory. If someone told you she's mentally impaired, they either don't know her very well or they're lying. The directness of Rosa's response clearly impressed the officers. After a few more questions and a review of my identification and doctor's contact information, they left with a report that would show I was competent and well cared for. But I knew this was just the beginning, his escalating faster than I expected. I told Patricia when I called her that afternoon. This is actually good news, she said. Marcus is showing his hand early, and he's being sloppy about it. False reports to police can backfire in court. It makes him look manipulative rather than concerned. What's his next move likely to be? Emergency guardianship petition. He'll claim you're in immediate danger and need emergency intervention. We should be ready for that. She was right. The next morning, Rosa and I were having coffee when Marcus's BMW pulled into the driveway, followed by a white van I didn't recognize. My heart started racing as Marcus got out of the car along with Sandra and 2 men in white uniforms. Mrs. Richardson, Rosa said urgently, call your lawyer. Right now. I dialed Patricia's number with shaking fingers while Rosa went to the front door. Through the window, I could see her blocking the entrance as Marcus tried to push past her. Patricia, they're here. Marcus brought what looks like medical transport. Don't let them in. Don't sign anything. Don't go with them voluntarily. I'm calling for an emergency injunction right now. I could hear raised voices from the front door. Marcus was shouting at Rosa, demanding she let him into. Check on his mother's welfare, Rosa, I called. Don't let them in. But Marcus had his own key. I heard it turning in the lock. And suddenly my living room was full of people I didn't want there. Mama, Marcus said in that fake, concerned voice, we're here to help. You've been having some episodes, and we think you need medical evaluation. I haven't had any episodes, Marcus. I'm perfectly fine. One of the men in white uniform stepped forward. Or Mrs. Richardson. I'm Dave from Metro Medical Transport. Your son has arranged for you to be evaluated at Sacred Heart Hospital. We're just here to make sure you get there safely. I'm not going anywhere with you. Sandra spoke up, her voice dripping with false sympathy. Mother Richardson, you called the police on Marcus yesterday. That's not normal behavior. We're just worried about you. I didn't call the police on anyone. Marcus sent the police to me with false reports. See, Marcus said to the transport men. This is what we've been dealing with. Paranoid delusions. Accusations against family members who are trying to help. I looked around my living room at these people who were treating me like I was already incompetent, already defeated. But I wasn't. I was Mabel Richardson, and this was my house, and I was not going quietly. Get out, I said firmly. Mama, you're not thinking clearly. Toot! I raised my voice for the first time. All of you. Get out of my house right now. I don't consent to any medical evaluation. I don't consent to any transport, and I want you to leave. Mrs. Richardson, one of the transport men said uncomfortably, we can't force you to come with us if you're refusing medical care. Marcus's face darkened. She's not competent to refuse care. That's why we're here, sir. She seems competent to me. She's answering questions appropriately. She knows where she is and what day it is, and she's clearly stating her wishes. You don't know her like I do. She's been acting irrationally for weeks. My aide can confirm it. Marcus looked at Rosa expectantly. Rosa looked him straight in the eye. Mr. Richardson, your mother has been completely rational and appropriate in all my interactions with her. I have no concerns about her mental competency. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus stared at Rosa with barely contained fury, while the transport men looked increasingly uncomfortable with the situation. Rosa, Marcus said in a voice like ice, you're fired. Pack your things and get out. Actually, Rosa said calmly, Mrs. Richardson is my employer, not you. You hired me initially, but she's been paying my wages from her own account for the past month. I work for her, not you. I hadn't known Rosa had made this arrangement, but I was grateful for her foresight. Marcus clearly hadn't expected this either. This is ridiculous, Sandra snapped. She's obviously not competent if she's being manipulated by the help. That was the wrong thing to say. I saw Rosa's spine straighten, and when she spoke, her voice was deadly quiet. I beg your pardon. You heard me. You're taking advantage of a confused old woman, probably stealing from her too. Sandra, I said, standing up to my full height. You will not speak to Rosa that way in my house. She has shown me more respect and honesty than you and Marcus have shown me in months. Mima, Marcus tried again. Can't you see what's happening here? This woman has turned you against your own family. No, Marcus. You did that all by yourself. I walked over to my bookshelf and pulled out the small recorder Patricia had suggested I keep there. Marcus's eyes widened as he realized what it was. I've been recording our conversations, Marcus. All of them. Just like Rosa recorded the conversations where you asked her to document fake symptoms and give me unnecessary medication. Just like she recorded you talking about selling my house and putting me in the cheapest nursing home you could find while you pocket the difference. The color drained from Marcus's face. You can't record private conversations without consent. Actually, I can, in my own home. And Marcus, I've already given copies to my lawyer, to Sarah, to Thomas, and to the police. Your plan is over. Sandra looked back and forth between Marcus and me, clearly realizing that their scheme had been exposed. Marcus, you said she didn't know. Shut up. Sandra, Marcus's mask had completely fallen away now. The loving, concerned son was gone, replaced by someone I barely recognized. Fine. You want to play hardball, Mama? I filed for emergency guardianship this morning. I have documentation going back 2 months showing your declining mental state and erratic behavior. You have documentation of lies and manipulation. I have documentation from a licensed health aide showing your inability to manage your affairs and your paranoid accusations against family members trying to help you. I looked at Rosa, who pulled out her own recorder. Actually, Mr. Richardson, what you have is documentation of me reporting that your mother is completely competent and that you asked me to falsify information about her mental state, which, by the way, is elder abuse and fraud. Marcus stared at the recorder in Rosa's hands, finally understanding that his plan had not just failed, it had backfired spectacularly. You can't use those recordings in court, he said desperately. Want to bet? I pulled out my phone and called Patricia. Patricia. Yes, they're here. Marcus just admitted he filed for emergency guardianship based on falsified reports. Yes, we got it all on tape. I hung up and looked at my son, this stranger wearing my child's face. Marcus, you have 5 minutes to get out of my house before the police arrive. And if you ever try anything like this again, I'll not only fight you in court, I'll press criminal charges for elder abuse, fraud, and attempted theft. The transport men were already packing up their equipment, clearly wanting no part of this family drama. Sandra was pulling at Marcus's arm, whispering urgently about lawyers and damage control, but Marcus just stared at me with something that might have been respect mixed with hatred. "This isn't over, Mama." "Yes, it is," I said quietly. "It's been over since the moment you decided I was worth more to you dead than alive." After they left, I sat down heavily in my favorite chair, suddenly feeling every one of my 72 years. Rosa brought me a cup of tea and sat beside me. "Are you okay, Mrs. Richardson?" I thought about it honestly. My son had just tried to have me kidnapped and declared incompetent so he could steal my life savings. My daughter-in-law had called me a confused old woman and insulted the one person who had stood by me. My own child had looked me in the eye and told me this wasn't over, making it clear he still intended to destroy me if he could. "No," I said. "I'm not okay. I'm heartbroken and angry and scared." "But Rosa—" "I'm also free. For the first time in months, I was free from the fear of what Marcus might do, free from the confusion about his motives, free from the gaslighting and manipulation. The worst had happened, and I was still standing. "What happens now?" Rosa asked. "Now we wait for the court hearing on his guardianship petition. And we make sure the judge sees exactly who Marcus really is." I looked around my living room in my house, surrounded by my things and my memories. Marcus hadn't gotten what he wanted today, and if I had anything to say about it, he never would. The battle was far from over, but for the first time since this nightmare began, I knew I was going to win. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with wood paneling that reminded me of my old school principal's office. I sat at a table next to Patricia, wearing my best navy dress and the pearls Jerome had given me for our 20th anniversary. I wanted to look like what I was, a competent, dignified woman who was perfectly capable of managing her own affairs. Across the aisle, Marcus sat with his expensive lawyer, a sharp-faced man in a $1,000 suit who kept shuffling through papers and whispering urgently in Marcus's ear. Sandra was there too, dressed like she was attending a funeral, which I supposed she was, the funeral of their scheme to steal my life. Judge Margaret Chen was a small Asian woman who couldn't have been much older than Sarah, but there was something in her eyes that told me she'd heard every sob story and seen every manipulation tactic in the book. I took comfort in that. "Your Honor," Marcus's lawyer began, "we're here today because Mr. Richardson is deeply concerned about his elderly mother's declining mental faculties and her inability to make sound decisions about her welfare. Over the past several months, Mrs. Richardson has exhibited increasing paranoia, hostility toward family members trying to help her, and poor judgment regarding her living situation and finances." I listened to this stranger describe me as if I were already gone, just a collection of symptoms and problems to be managed. But I kept my face calm and my hands folded, the way I used to during difficult parent conferences when I was teaching. "Mr. Richardson has documentation from Mrs. Richardson's home health aide showing concerning behaviors, incidents of confusion, and resistance to necessary care. We believe emergency guardianship is necessary to protect Mrs. Richardson from herself and from others who may be taking advantage of her vulnerable state." The lawyer presented a thick folder of papers to the judge, Marcus's carefully constructed case against my competency. I watched Judge Chen flip through the pages, her expression neutral. "Thank you, Mr. Davidson. Ms. Williams, your response." Patricia stood up with her own folder, considerably thicker than Marcus's. "Your Honor, this is not a case of a concerned son trying to protect his vulnerable mother. This is a case of financial elder abuse, attempted fraud, and systematic manipulation designed to steal Mrs. Richardson's assets under the guise of protection." She opened her folder and pulled out a stack of documents. "I'd like to present to the court several recordings made by Mrs. Richardson's home health aide, Rosa Martinez, documenting Mr. Richardson's actual instructions to her and his real plans for his mother." A Marcus's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor. Those recordings were made without my client's knowledge or consent, Your Honor. Patricia replied smoothly. The recordings were made by Ms. Martinez in Mrs. Richardson's home, with Mrs. Richardson's knowledge and consent, documenting what she was being asked to do as part of her employment. They're absolutely admissible. Judge Chen nodded. I'll allow them. Please proceed. What followed was the most surreal 20 minutes of my life. Sitting in that courtroom, listening to my own son's voice lay out his plan to destroy me with clinical precision, felt like watching someone else's nightmare. But as the recordings played, I watched Marcus's face grow paler and his lawyer's confident expression crumble. The courtroom heard Marcus asking Rosa to document fake symptoms. They heard him discussing selling my house and putting me in the cheapest nursing home possible. They heard him talking about drugging me into the very condition he was claiming I already had. Most damning of all, they heard his conversation with Sandra about moving quickly once they got guardianship so I wouldn't have time to fight back legally. When the recordings finished, the silence in the courtroom was deafening. Your Honor, Patricia continued, I'd also like to present testimony from Mrs. Richardson's daughter Sarah, who's joining us by video conference from Atlanta. The bailiff wheeled in a laptop, and suddenly Sarah's face filled the screen. She looked like she'd been crying, but her voice was strong and clear. Your Honor, I want to state unequivocally that my mother is one of the most mentally sharp people I know. She remembers everyone's birthdays, manages her own finances down to the penny, and until recently was tutoring neighborhood children in reading. If anyone told you she's incompetent, they're either mistaken or lying. Sarah paused, looking directly at Marcus through the screen. I'm ashamed to say that I allowed my brother to convince me that our mother needed managing, without ever talking to her directly about what she wanted or needed. I trusted him because he's my brother, but I should have trusted her because she's proven her competence every day of her life. Marcus's lawyer tried to salvage the situation. Your Honor, family members aren't qualified to assess mental competency. Which is why, Patricia interrupted, we also have a comprehensive psychological evaluation from Dr. Elizabeth Stone, a geriatric psychiatrist who examined Mrs. Richardson last week. Dr. Stone's report was devastating to Marcus's case. I had scored in the 95th percentile on every cognitive test, showed no signs of dementia or mental impairment, and demonstrated excellent judgment and reasoning skills. Her conclusion was unambiguous. I was not only competent but exceptionally sharp for someone of any age. Furthermore, Your Honor, Patricia continued, I'd like Mrs. Richardson to speak for herself. I stood up slowly, my legs steadier than I'd expected. Looking at Judge Chen, I felt like I was back in my classroom, explaining a difficult concept to a student who genuinely wanted to understand. Your Honor, I am 72 years old. I am not senile, confused, or incompetent. I have been managing my own affairs successfully for 30 years since my husband died. I own my home free and clear. I have substantial savings, and I have harmed no one. I turned to look at Marcus, who couldn't meet my eyes. My son has systematically tried to convince everyone, including me, that I am no longer capable of living independently. He has lied to my other children, manipulated my home health aide, and filed false reports with the police. He has done all of this not out of love or concern, but because he wants my money and my house. My voice grew stronger as I continued. I understand that adult children sometimes need to step in when elderly parents truly can't care for themselves. But that is not what's happening here. What's happening here is theft, plain and simple, and I will not be stolen from, not even by my own son. I sat back down, my hands shaking slightly from adrenaline, but my mind crystal clear. Judge Chen looked at Marcus. Mr. Richardson, do you have anything to say in response to these allegations? Marcus stood up slowly. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of the little boy I'd raised, the one who used to apologize with genuine remorse when he'd done something wrong. But then his jaw hardened, and the stranger was back. Your Honor, my mother is clearly being manipulated by her aide and her lawyer. She's always been stubborn, but this level of hostility toward family is new. I'm only trying to protect her. Protect her from what, Mr. Richardson? From making poor decisions, from being taken advantage of, from living in an unsafe situation. Mr. Richardson, can you point to any specific poor decisions your mother has made? Any evidence that she's been taken advantage of financially? Any actual unsafe conditions in her home? Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it again. The truth was, he couldn't point to any of those things because none of them existed. Your Honor, his lawyer tried one last time. Elderly people can be very good at hiding cognitive decline. Enough. Judge Chen's voice cut through the courtroom like a blade. I've heard enough. She looked down at her notes for a long moment. Then back up at all of us. This court finds no evidence whatsoever that Mrs. Richardson lacks the capacity to make decisions about her own welfare. The evidence presented shows that she is mentally competent, financially responsible, and living safely in her own home. A relief flooded through me like warm water. Furthermore, Judge Chen continued, this court is deeply troubled by the evidence of systematic manipulation and attempted fraud presented by the respondent. Mr. Richardson, your petition for guardianship is not only denied, I am ordering the court clerk to flag your name in our system to prevent any future frivolous petitions regarding your mother's competency. She looked directly at Marcus, her expression stern. I am also recommending that this matter be referred to the district attorney's office for investigation of possible elder abuse and fraud charges. Marcus went white. His lawyer was already whispering urgently about appeals and damage control, but I could see in Marcus's eyes that he knew it was over. Judge Chen turned to me with a slight smile. Mrs. Richardson, you are free to continue living your life exactly as you choose. This court finds you to be competent, capable, and quite frankly, an inspiration. As we left the courthouse, Patricia put her hand on my arm. How do you feel? I thought about it as we walked down the steps into the bright afternoon sunlight. How did I feel? Relieved, certainly. Vindicated, absolutely. But also something else, something I hadn't felt in a very long time. I feel proud of myself, I said finally. For the first time in months, I feel proud of who I am. Rosa was waiting for us by the car, her face anxious until she saw our expressions. We won, she asked. We won, I confirmed. It's over, Rosa, it's finally over. As we drove home, I looked out the window at the neighborhood I'd lived in for 40 years. The same streets, the same houses, the same oak trees Jerome and I had watched grow from saplings. But everything looked different now. Brighter, more vivid, more mine. I had fought for my independence and won. I had stood up to someone who tried to steal not just my money, but my very identity as a capable person. And I had proven that being 72 didn't make me powerless, it just made me more experienced at fighting battles that mattered. The war was over. But more importantly, I had remembered who I was, Mabel Richardson. A woman who had never backed down from a fight when something important was at stake. And nothing was more important than the right to live my own life on my own terms. 6 months after the court hearing, I was sitting in Rosa's kitchen, helping her daughter Maria practice her college application essays. The kitchen was warm and filled with the smell of Rosa's homemade tamales, and I felt more at home there than I had in my own house during those dark months when Marcus was manipulating my life. Mrs. Richardson, Maria said, looking up from her laptop. Can you read this paragraph about overcoming challenges? I adjusted my reading glasses and read her words about growing up in a household where English was the second language, about her dreams of becoming a nurse like her mother, about the strength she'd learned from watching Rosa work multiple jobs to support the family. It's beautiful, Maria, but I think you should add something about how watching your mother stand up for what was right, even when it was difficult, taught you about courage. Rosa looked up from the stove, her eyes soft. Mrs. Richardson, you were the one showing courage. I was just doing my job. No, Rosa. You were doing what was right, even when it could have cost you everything. That's not just a job, that's character. It had taken me months to fully understand what Rosa had risked for me. She could have lost her income, her reputation, even faced legal troubles if Marcus had been more clever about his scheme. But she had chosen to protect me instead of protecting herself. In doing so, she had shown me what real family looked like. After Marcus's legal defeat, I had made some changes in my life. The biggest was selling my house, not because I was forced to, but because I chose to. The 4-bedroom house had been perfect for raising 3 children, but it was too big and too full of painful memories for a woman starting over at 72. I'd bought a small 2-bedroom apartment in Rose's neighborhood, close enough that we could have coffee together every morning, far enough that we both had our independence. The apartment was bright and modern, with a small garden where I could grow tomatoes and roses. Most importantly, it was mine, chosen by me, purchased by me, decorated according to my own taste. The money from selling the house had allowed me to do something I'd always dreamed of: start a foundation. The Mabel Richardson Foundation for Elder Protection provided legal assistance to elderly people facing family financial abuse. Patricia Williams served as our legal director, and we'd already helped 12 families fight back against greedy relatives trying to steal their independence. Sarah had become my closest ally in this work. The guilt she felt about believing Marcus's lies had motivated her to become an expert on elder abuse prevention. She flew in from Atlanta once a month to help train volunteers and speak to community groups about the warning signs of family financial exploitation. Thomas, when he returned from deployment, had been less forgiving than his sister. "Mom, I always knew Marcus was selfish, but I never thought he'd try to destroy you for money," he'd said during his first visit to my new apartment. "I'm sorry I wasn't here to protect you, Thomas. I didn't need protection. I needed support. And now I know I have it." The hardest part hadn't been the legal battle or even the betrayal itself. The hardest part had been learning to trust my own judgment again after months of being told I was confused, paranoid, and incompetent. It took time to stop second-guessing every decision, to stop wondering if maybe Marcus had been right about my declining abilities. But gradually, with Rose's friendship and Patricia's encouragement, I had rebuilt my confidence. I was tutoring again, not just Maria, but several students from the community center. I was managing my own finances, making my own decisions, and living exactly the way I wanted to live. Marcus had disappeared from my life completely after the court hearing. According to Sarah, he and Sandra had moved to another state, ostensibly for a new business opportunity, but probably to escape the scandal of his attempted fraud. He never called, never wrote, never acknowledged what he had tried to do to me. For a long time, that silence had hurt almost as much as his betrayal, but eventually I came to see it as a gift. Marcus had shown me who he really was, and now I was free to build relationships with people who valued me for who I was, not what I could give them. "Mrs. Richardson," Maria said, interrupting my thoughts, "there's something I want to ask you." "What's it, dear? How do you forgive someone who hurt you that badly? I mean, I know you've forgiven Mr. Marcus because you don't talk about him with anger anymore. But how?" I set down my coffee cup and considered the question carefully. It was something I'd thought about a lot in recent months. "Maria, I think there's a difference between forgiveness and acceptance. I don't think I've forgiven Marcus. Forgiveness would mean I've let go of the hurt he caused me, and I'm not sure I ever will completely. But I have accepted that he is who he is, and I can't change that." I looked out Rosa's kitchen window at the children playing in the courtyard below. "What I've learned is that holding on to anger and hurt only gives the person who wronged you more power over your life. Marcus already took months of my peace and happiness. I wasn't going to let him take any more." Rosa joined us at the table, wiping her hands on a dish towel. "Mrs. Richardson, can I ask you something? Do you ever regret fighting back? Would it have been easier to just let him do what he wanted? Easier, maybe. But Rosa, there are things worse than a legal battle or family conflict. Having your dignity stripped away, your independence stolen, your very identity erased, those things are worse than any fight. I thought about the woman I'd been 6 months ago, confused and frightened, allowing other people to make decisions about my life because I'd been convinced I was no longer capable of making them myself. I spent months feeling like I was losing my mind, wondering if maybe everyone else was right and I really was becoming incompetent. That was a special kind of torture, not being able to trust your own thoughts and perceptions. Fighting back gave me myself back. Maria nodded thoughtfully. And now you're helping other people get themselves back too. That's the plan. Maria, one of the most valuable lessons I've learned from this whole experience is that struggle and failure aren't the end of your story. They're just chapters. What matters is what you do with what you've learned. The foundation had been my way of turning poison into medicine. Every elderly person we helped stand up to financial abuse, every family we educated about the warning signs of exploitation, every legal victory we won, it all helped heal the wound Marcus had left in my heart. Last month, we'd helped an 80-year-old man named George whose daughter was trying to force him into a nursing home so she could sell his house. The parallels to my own situation were heartbreaking, but seeing George stand up in court and reclaim his independence had been one of the most satisfying moments of my life. "You saved me," he'd told me afterward. "Not just my house or my money you saved me." But the truth was he had saved himself. Just like I had saved myself, we'd just given him the tools and support he needed to do it. "Mrs. Richardson," Rosa said gently, "do you think you'll ever have a relationship with Marcus again?" I considered the question honestly. I don't know. Maybe someday he'll realize what he did and want to make amends. Maybe he'll never understand why what he did was wrong. Either way, I'm at peace with it. How can you be at peace with losing a child? Because I've learned the difference between losing someone and being freed from someone who was hurting you. Marcus isn't the son I raised, Rosa. The son I raised would never have tried to steal my independence and dignity. That person died somewhere along the way, and I've had to grieve him. It was true. I'd had to mourn the loss of the Marcus I thought I knew. The successful, caring son who promised to take care of me when I got old. That man had never really existed, or if he had, he'd been replaced by someone who saw his own mother as nothing more than an asset to be liquidated. But here's what I've gained, I continued. I've gained the knowledge that I'm stronger than I ever imagined. I've gained friends like you and Patricia, who chose to stand by me when it would have been easier to walk away. I've gained purpose in helping others who are facing what I faced. And most importantly, I've gained myself back. Maria finished typing something on her laptop, then looked up at me with a smile. "Mrs. Richardson, can I put that in my essay? About how sometimes losing someone means being freed from someone who was hurting you." "Of course, dear. But make sure you use your own words. Colleges want to hear your voice, not mine. But your voice taught me how to find my own voice. Just like you taught my mom to find hers when she stood up to Mr. Marcus." I felt tears prick my eyes. This was what family really looked like. Not people related by blood who felt entitled to control you, but people who chose to support and encourage and protect each other. As I walked home to my apartment that evening, I thought about the woman I'd been a year ago. That Mabel Richardson had been trusting to a fault, naive about the people closest to her, and willing to sacrifice her own needs to avoid family conflict. She'd been a good woman, but she'd also been vulnerable in ways that had nearly cost her everything. The woman I was now was different. Wiser, maybe. Certainly more cautious about trusting people's motives, but also stronger, more confident in her own judgment, and absolutely certain of her own worth. I'd learned that being elderly doesn't make you helpless, that family isn't always defined by blood, and that it's never too late to fight for your right to live life on your own terms. Most importantly, I'd learned that the most valuable life lessons often come from the darkest struggles and the most painful failures. Marcus had tried to destroy me, but in fighting back, I had discovered strengths I didn't know I possessed and found family I hadn't known I needed. As I unlocked the door to my apartment, in my name, chosen by me, I smiled. Tomorrow I had a meeting with a new client for the foundation, an elderly woman whose nephew was trying to convince her she needed a financial guardian. Next week, I was flying to Atlanta to visit Sarah and meet my newest grandbaby. Next month, Rosa and I were planning a trip to see Thomas at his new duty station. My life was full of possibilities, full of people who valued me for who I was, full of purposes that gave meaning to my days. Marcus had tried to convince the world that I was a confused old woman whose life was nearly over. Instead, he had helped me discover that at 72 my life was just beginning, and that, perhaps, was the most valuable lesson of all. 2 years later, the Mabel Richardson Foundation had helped over 50 families fight elder financial abuse. I was invited to speak at conferences, had been interviewed by newspapers, and had even appeared on a local television show to talk about the warning signs of family exploitation. But the moment I was most proud of was simpler, sitting in my garden on a Sunday morning, sharing coffee with Rosa while her grandchildren played among my tomato plants. Sarah was visiting with her family, and Thomas was calling from his new assignment in Japan. We were talking and laughing, this chosen family of mine, and I realized that happiness isn't about having a perfect family or a life without struggle. Happiness is about knowing your own worth, surrounding yourself with people who see it too, and never giving up the fight to live authentically. Marcus had tried to steal my independence, my dignity, and my identity. Instead, he had given me the greatest gift of all, the knowledge that I was strong enough to save myself. And that knowledge, at 74, was more valuable than any house, any bank account, or any inheritance I might have left behind. The most valuable life lessons from struggle and failure: that you are stronger than whatever tries to break you, that real family chooses to love and support you, and that it's never too late to start over. At any age, under any circumstances, for any reason that matters to you. Remember that, and remember that you are worth fighting for, especially when you have to do the fighting yourself.